We begin tonight with a dramatic pronouncement from the Supreme Court seeking the dissolution of the 12th Parliament. Earlier this afternoon, Chief Justice David Maraga wrote to President Uhuru Kenyatta asking him to send the MPs home for failing to pass the 2/3 gender law. Maraga invoked the last resort provision in the Constitution following a petition brought by civil society groups. And as Waihiga Mwaura now reports, the ball is now in the President's court, as the Constitution expressly charges him to act on the advice of the Chief Justice and dissolve the August House.
With just months to the end of his tenure, Chief Justice David Maraga invoked the dreaded Article 261 following 10 years of Parliament's failed attempts at meeting the now infamous gender rule. The CJ citing 6 petitions presented before him, including one by the Law Society of Kenya, challenging the constitutionality of a parliament that is not gender compliant. Maraga saying, and I quote, that despite 4 court orders compelling Parliament to enact the legislation required to implement the 2/3 gender rule, Parliament has blatantly failed, refused and/or neglected to do so, end quote. The CJ recognizing that the verdict would cause the country some pain, but insisting that it is the cost of constitutional democracy. He says, adding, let us endure pain, if only to remind ourselves that being a democracy that has chosen to be governed by the rule of law, we must say no to impunity and hold everyone accountable for their actions or omissions, end quote. And resorting to what many have seen until now as the last resort in this 10-year tussle, advising the President to dissolve Parliament as required by Article 261, Section 7 of the Constitution. Twice in the letter, the Chief Justice tells the President, and I quote, it is my constitutional duty to advise Your Excellency to dissolve Parliament under Article 261, Section 7 of the Constitution, end quote.
It is now is discretion. But of course, before taking any action, it is important for everybody to look at whether this action is going to advance good governance, rule of law, or human rights.
The National Assembly Speaker terming the Chief Justice's advice as unrealistic.
I have a number of issues which I've shared with him in the past, and unfortunately I'm told he has ignored all of them. And therefore it is unfair for the judiciary to single out Parliament as the one that has failed to enact any legislation.
The 2/3 gender rule is anchored on Article 27, Section 3 of the Constitution that states that, and I quote, women and men have the right to equal treatment, including the right to equal opportunities in political, economic, cultural and social spheres. With the main issue in the 6 petitions having to do with the composition of elective and appointive positions, Parliament has been blamed for the gender deadlock because of Article 261 of the Constitution, which mandated the August House to, and I quote, enact any legislation required by this Constitution to be enacted to govern a particular matter, end quote. But the Speaker insists the problem is bigger than Parliament.
The other arms are not compliant. The Cabinet isn't. Is it compliant with that principle? And it is appointive, it's not elective. I just wonder, somebody in the judiciary will be making that kind of decision when they have a Supreme Court which is not gender compliant, the apex court in the land.
Muturi raising practical questions too about the viability of holding a fresh parliamentary election right now.
IEBC has to be prepared. There will be people who may not have been registered voters in 2017 who might wish to vote in an ensuing by-election, which is the size of a whole general election.
Senate Minority Leader James Orengo termed the decision as momentous, adding that how we apply foundational principles and values of the rule of law and constitutionalism is now the big test, end quote. For now, however, the ball is in the court of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Article 261, Section 7 says he shall dissolve Parliament once he has received the advice from the Chief Justice. But the Constitution does not give him any time frame within which to act. Neither does it prescribe what happens if he does not. Waihiga Mwaura, Citizen TV.